There is an old Terran saying, older than the Imperium itself, that every war, no matter how vast or devastating, begins with a single shot. For the Imperium of Man, that shot rang out on the world of Isstvan III, when blood was drawn not from alien foes or rebellious tyrants, but from brother Astartes. 15 years before that fateful betrayal, Isstvan III had been brought into Imperial compliance. The campaign was led by Primarch Corax and the shadow-cloaked warriors of the Raven Guard, members of the 27th Expeditionary Fleet. The Istvanians, grim and disciplined in war, had proven no easy prey. They were professional soldiers who did not falter easily, even before the transhuman might of the Adeptus Astartes. But falter they did. At Redarth Valley, the last embers of resistance were extinguished beneath the talons of Corax's 19th Legion. The remaining Istvanian leadership knelt in surrender before the Primarch and his 800 companies. They had been adversaries, but they were welcomed into the fold, not as slaves, but as future Imperial citizens. The Imperial truth, that cold secular doctrine forged in Terra's golden halls, was to be their new scripture. To oversee this cultural transformation, the Emperor entrusted Vardis Prahl, once a major of the 11th Lastran Rifles, and now a seasoned civil servant, with the role of Imperial Planetary Governor. Prahl's mission? To uphold compliance, dismantle the old faiths, and enforce the truth. He was to be the Emperor's hand upon this world. But truth, when forced upon the faithful, often festers. Time passed. Governor Prahl tore down shrines. He cracked open the sealed vaults of ancient Istvanian cults. He declared war, not on armies, but on fear, superstition, and faith, the pillars of Istvan's culture. The results of this crusade were never known. Warp storms, writhing in the space around the system, thickened into a psychic shroud. Communication with Isstvan ceased. 6 standard years later, a faint astropathic echo clawed its way to the fringes of Imperial space. A Death Guard patrol vessel, adrift near Neo-Geddon, intercepted the broken signal. Fragmented though it was, the core message chilled the hearts of all who heard it. Isstvan III had rebelled. Prahl, the Emperor's own appointee, now led the uprising. The Coral City, Privanak, the jewel of the planet, ran red with the blood of Imperial citizens. The signal was at least 2 years old, perhaps more. It mattered not. The act of rebellion was a black stain upon the Great Crusade. The betrayal of a sworn Imperial commander demanded retribution. The one to deliver that punishment would be the War Master himself, Horus Lupercal. To the Imperium, the reconquest of Isstvan III was an act of justice. To Horus, it was the perfect mask. The War Master used the opportunity not only to crush a revolt, but to gather his own strength and eliminate the loyal opposition hidden within his own legion and those of his allies. The distant location of Isstvan, along with the swirling warp storms cloaking the region, provided the perfect cover. 4 legions were summoned: the Death Guard, Emperor's Children, World Eaters, and Horus's own Sons of Horus. Under the guise of crushing rebellion, he gathered these warriors to his banner. Meanwhile, he dispatched 3 of the most loyalist legions: the Dark Angels, Blood Angels, and Ultramarines, to distant campaigns in the Cygnus and Viridian systems, far from the truth of what was to unfold. Other legions remained scattered across the galaxy, locked in ongoing campaigns, blind to the betrayal gestating in the heart of their own brotherhood. The word-bearers, long corrupted, were already entwined in Horus's treachery. The White Scars and Imperial Fists were too near to Terra to be approached directly, and the Thousand Suns and Space Wolves had already been consumed by the flames of Prospero. The colossal war fleet soon darkened the void around the Isstvan system. Initial battles on Isstvan Extremis, the system's outermost world, tested the mettle of the legions. In one such skirmish, Nathaniel Garrow of the Death Guard fought beside Lord Commander Eidolon of the Emperor's Children, striking down a powerful war singer, a psyker of forbidden strength. Garrow was gravely wounded, his torso crushed, his leg severed, and only survived due to the grisly expertise of the Emperor's Children's chief apothecary, Fabius. Eidolon, meanwhile, revealed a disturbing enhancement: a tracheal implant that allowed him to unleash a sonic scream, a weapon stolen from alien biology. It was a victory, but one that reeked of corruption. At last, Horus met in secret with Angron, Ortarian, and Eidolon aboard the Vengeful Spirit. There, the true nature of the campaign was unveiled. The Primarchs had already identified loyalist elements in their legions, battle brothers whose allegiance to the Emperor was beyond question. These warriors, if left unchecked, could endanger the entire conspiracy. And so, the plan was formed. 1/3 of each legion, those deemed suspect, were ordered to spearhead the assault on Isstvan III. Drop pods rained from orbit, filled with thousands of loyal Space Marines who believed they were fighting for the Emperor. Once planetside, they would be trapped. There would be no escape. 4 primary targets were identified in the Coral City. The Emperor's Children would strike at the seat of government, aiming to capture or kill Prahl himself. The World Eaters would seize the central plazas, the arteries of movement. The Death Guard were assigned the western fortifications to isolate and destroy the entrenched defenders. And to the east, where the Siren Hold stood in eerie defiance, cloaked in the power of forbidden cults and psychic might, the Sons of Horus were unleashed with orders to annihilate everything, Additional targets, including the city's starport and infrastructure centers, were assigned to smaller strike teams. The first wave descended, a force of the Emperor's finest, unknowingly marching into the furnace of betrayal. Their war would not be one of liberation. It would be a purge. It began as iron rain, fiery trails streaking down through the skies of Isstvan III, as thousands of drop pods smashed into the surface of the coral city. Thunder rolled across the horizon as orbital lance strikes hammered ground targets in perfect coordination, clearing the skies and granting the Space Marine Legion's absolute air superiority. This was no tentative invasion. It was annihilation incarnate. Resistance was fierce, more frenzied than the original compliance campaign that had once pacified the world. But the defenders, now half-mad, flesh-scarred zealots of Slaanesh, faced the full fury of the Emperor's Angels of Death. They wielded stolen Imperial weapons and manned expertly arranged trench networks, bristling with autocannons, mortars, and armored basilisks that emerged from hidden bunkers. Even Malkador heavy tanks rumbled up from below the earth to meet the assault. But the Death Guard were unshakable. The Sons of Barbarous dropped directly into the heart of enemy fire. Artillery overshot, blinded by the audacity of the landing. And in the smoke-choked trenches of the Western Front, the Death Guard advanced, unstoppable. Terminator squads tore down gun towers and cracked open bunkers. Tactical Marines stormed the trenches in waves, bolters roaring in disciplined volleys. Above them, gunships descended to deliver Vindicators and Land Raiders, which crashed through the granite fortifications like juggernauts. The air pulsed with the thunder of close-range bombardments. And then came the Earthshakers, titans of the Legio Mortis, whose massive forms descended to the west. With their turbo blasters and Gatling guns, they reduced the bastions to molten ruin, their firepower liquefying stone and shattering defenses like wax beneath a furnace. In the city's heart, beneath the towering spires of imperial governance, came the storm of the World Eaters. The first wave hit like a meteor strike, drop pods slamming into the plaza stones and shattering the grand colonnades into rubble. The 12th Legion poured out like a swarm of steel-clad beasts, their chain blades howling as they tore into the panicked defenders. Hundreds died in moments. The scent of blood and the roar of violence flooded the city's core. And then came the golden fire. Precision strikes descending like the wrath of gods. These were no random drops. They were aimed directly at the precentor's palace, an imposing fortress rebuilt by Imperial engineers to resist even orbital fire. It mattered not. With flawless coordination, the Emperor's children landed in tight formations at the palace's many entrances. Renowned for their precision and brutal efficiency, they surged forward in perfect rhythm. Dreadnoughts smashed open the dome from above with siege claws, while melta-guns carved new entrances through the very walls. Resistance was fierce but futile. Room by room, chamber by chamber, the Emperor's children carved their way inside. To the east lay the Siren Hold, the dark heart of the rebellion. Resembling the venting stacks of deep-sea vents, its great tomb spires stretched into the polluted skies. And it was there that the sons of Horus fell upon their prey. Their drop pods scattered under intense fire, but the 16th Legion rallied swiftly. With cold fury and battle-hardened poise, they surged into the temple complex, turning the winding catacombs into a blood-choked maze of war. There, for the first time in true force, the war singers revealed themselves. Witches of sound, clad in relic technology that let them float and shield themselves with walls of sonic force. Their voices shattered ceramite, burst organs, and powdered bones. Their presence sent the civilian cultists into paroxysms of zealotry, charging into the maelstrom with suicidal devotion. A terrible chorus of psychic sound swept over the coral city, an unnatural shriek that drowned even the cacophony of battle. It tore at the minds of men, driving thousands into fits of madness and hatred. Only the resilience of Astartes' will and the baffling protocols of their armor saved the Space Marines from ruin. At the walls, the Death Guard and Titans finished their grim work, reducing the fortifications to rubble. In the plaza, the World Eaters found themselves beset by madness incarnate. The population surged toward them in a sea of flesh. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Laughing, shrieking, heedless of death, the civilians charged Angron's warriors in suicidal devotion, and the World Eaters answered them. They fought back to back, frag grenades blossoming through human waves, heavy bolters and missile launchers running dry as they carved a mountain of corpses at their feet. Inside the Siren Hold and Precentor's palace, the battle raged inch by inch. The war singers cut down many before they were slain. Strange, elite defenders emerged, black-armored cultists wielding relic weapons that unleashed sonic blasts and liquid metal darts. In the deepest reaches of the tomb spires, Captain Garviel Loken led a spearhead into a blood-slick shrine, later named Death's Tomb. There, amidst 4 idols and rotting corpses, he and his warriors brought low the last of the war singers. At the same moment, a strike force of Emperor's children, led by the famed Captain Lucius, fought their way into the throne room of the traitor himself, Vardis Prahl. Clad in warped, Baroque power armor and wielding psychosonic weaponry, Prahl unleashed all the foul power of his arcane rebellion. But it was not enough. In a desperate duel, Lucius slew him, cutting down the master of the cult with brutal precision. With Prahl's fall and the destruction of the Death Tomb's shrine, the city's psychic scream faltered and collapsed. Resistance vanished with it. By nightfall, the rebellion was in ruins. The objectives were secured, the defenders slain in the tens of thousands. The Space Marines, bloodied, battered, victorious, celebrated their hard-fought triumph. But even as they stood upon the corpse-strewn ground, arms raised in pride, the trap was already sprung. The true betrayal had yet to fall from the sky. The fall of the Coral City should have marked the end. Victory was achieved, the enemy routed, the objectives taken. But then silence. Communications with the orbiting Imperial fleet abruptly ceased. The Titans of Legio Mortis, those colossal gods of war, turned without a word and began a slow, deliberate march back beyond the city walls, vanishing into the plains like specters. High above, the great battleships and battle barges of the fleet, Vengeful Spirit, Firebird, Andronius, Killing Star, Indomitable Will, Gauntlet of Spire, War Child, and the Conqueror, broke from their station-keeping patterns and descended into low orbit. Then came the fire. Decks of macro-cannon batteries ignited into salvo after salvo, ejecting a cascade of munitions into Isstvan III's lower atmosphere. But these were not high-explosive rounds or tactical penetrators. They carried the Life Eater virus, a weapon of mass extinction, Exterminatus class, permitted only by the highest authority. It was a death sentence writ across the stars, one that only the Emperor or the War Master himself could authorize. The virus was a necrophage, its action instantaneous. Within moments of impact, its dispersal agents erupted in 1,000 plumes, blanketing the city and countryside alike. It infected on contact, rotting flesh from within, drowning lungs and liquefied organs, collapsing flora into slurry, and reducing every living thing to fetid sludge. Screams were silenced as quickly as they came. In minutes, the world began to melt. Winds blew corpse vapors through the steel and stone arteries of the city, and the plains beyond curdled into blistered death. The oceans turned green, sour with decay, and from orbit, the world now resembled a cancerous orb, sickly and stained, suspended in the void. But Horus was not done. As the viral mass swelled and choked the atmosphere, a single lance strike from the Vengeful Spirit punched into the miasma. The air caught fire. Flames howled across continents, igniting a firestorm that stripped the surface to bare rock. Entire cities exploded. Gas lines ruptured into infernos. Towers twisted and toppled in burning cascades. And everything, flesh, steel, stone, was incinerated in a gale of living flame. Isstvan III became a torch in the dark. Those Astartes who had weathered the virus by sealing themselves in airtight shelters found themselves beset by fire, the air around them igniting as they scrambled for cover once more. But there was no cover from this, not from the betrayal, not from the flames. By the time silence fell upon the command decks of the vengeful spirit, 8 billion souls were gone. The galaxy, unknowingly, had just crossed into civil war. Yet, even as Horus's hammer fell, his plans had already begun to unravel. Among the stars, aboard the orbiting fleet, some had discovered the truth. Some had resisted. Battle Captain Nathaniel Garrow of the Death Guard, a veteran of Terra, and one of the 14th Legion's earliest recruits, had sensed the stench of betrayal. Acting swiftly, he rallied loyalists and took command of the frigate Eisenstein, broadcasting warnings to the brothers below, those still unaware of what was to come. Elsewhere, in the fleet of the Emperor's children, Captain Saul Tarvitz, a line officer long suspicious of his Legion's secrecy, made his own discovery mere minutes before the bombardment. Unable to prevent it, he commandeered a Thunderhawk gunship and flew to the surface, bringing his warning with him. Thanks to these 2 men, many received the message. They found shelter, sealed bunkers, bastions, even the catacombs beneath the Siren Hold. They survived. But not all were so lucky. The World Eaters, stationed furthest from secure shelter, bore the brunt of the virus strike. Some reached safety, most did not. Even their power armor, though sealed, could not wholly protect against the virulent rot. The virus worked through cracks, through battle damage, through seams. Superhuman warriors screamed, and that, more than anything, told of its horror. Even many who reached cover died after sealing themselves in, bringing the infection inside with them. And those who survived the virus met the fire, and there was no sanctuary in flame. In orbit, loyalists who were not assigned to the ground attack found themselves betrayed as well, knives in the dark. Traitor Marines turning on their own ships, cutting down Imperial Army soldiers, iterators, and functionaries. Some resisted, some fled. Some fought shipboard wars that delayed or disrupted the War Master's plan. On board the torpedo monitor, Duquois, loyalist forces held out. They turned their guns on traitor vessels, destroying escorts and crippling the Killing Star before they were overwhelmed and annihilated. The Mechanicus vessel, Xerxes 977, late to the fleet and uninformed of Horus's betrayal, refused to surrender. It had to be brought down by force, its hulk spiraling into the fires below. And aboard the heavy cruiser Sunstone, the Terran Duke Mortector led his lifeguard in a deck-by-deck battle against a delegation of Emperor's children, attempting to seize the vessel and assassinate the Emperor's representative. The final fate of the Sunstone is unknown, only that it ended in a cataclysmic magazine explosion, scattering wreckage into the black. Amid the chaos, Garrow knew what must be done. The Eisenstein, lightly armed, had no hope against Horus's fleet, but fortune favored them. Their position at the fleet's rear gave them a sliver of opportunity. Faking a reactor malfunction, they dropped back from formation under the pretext of standard safety protocol. It wouldn't hold long. First Captain Callus Typhon of the Death Guard soon noted the silence from his subordinate Ignatius Grolgor, already slain aboard the Eisenstein, and gave chase aboard the fearsome Terminus Est. The Eisenstein was battered, nearly destroyed by the larger ship's fire. Her astropaths were dead, her navigator dying, but she escaped, making a blind warp jump, vanishing from the Isstvan system. No one knew if she would survive, but she carried the truth. Down below, the fires at last guttered out. Auspex sweeps and surveyor scans began to comb the charred surface of Isstvan III, expecting nothing more than echoes of death. What they found shocked them. Nearly 100,000 loyalist Astartes had been on the surface during the bombardment, drawn from the sons of Horus, the Emperor's children, the Death Guard, and the World Eaters. Despite the virus, despite the firestorm, a staggering 2/3 of them had survived. Sheltered in bunkers and bastions, warned just in time, they had trusted to training, equipment, and gene-forged resilience, and endured. Now, they rose from the ashes. As storms broke over the scarred land, communications burst to life. Vox channels crackled. Signals screamed across the ruin. There were demands, curses, cries of fury and heartbreak, words spoken in betrayal. Never before had the legions of Astartes turned so terribly upon their own. Now, on the ashen bones of Isstvan III, the Loyalists prepared to answer that betrayal with vengeance. The failure of the virus bombing to annihilate the Loyalists sent ripples of chaos through Horus's already fraying plans. As he scrambled to reassert control and began drafting orders for a conventional orbital bombardment, the situation was torn from his grasp. Acting without orders, and perhaps stoked by whispers from within his own ranks, or simply driven by the savage impulse to personally end those who had once followed him, Angron, Primarch of the World Eaters, unleashed his fury. From the Conqueror, the flagship of his legion, Angron led the charge. A vanguard of gunships streaked towards Isstvan III, followed closely by a second wave of drop pods. At the forefront was the Red Angel himself, descending into the ash-scoured plazas west of the Precentor's palace, with 50 companies of blood-hungry world eaters at his back. Horus and his inner circle could only watch in seething outrage. Angron had acted without sanction, throwing the entire battle plan into disarray. Yet down he came, and down came his sons, the skies above the ruined city churning with thunderhawks and storm eagles. Their strafing runs were met with sporadic but immediate return fire. They had found the Loyalists. Angron roared from the hold of his gunship and slammed into the cracked and blackened bones that paved the plazas like withered leaves in a dead forest. His axes, Gore-Father and Gore-Child, screamed with the same anticipation that burned behind the Primarch's eyes. Fire lashed out from the broken skyline, but it did not slow him. He strode through it all, a mythic beast of battle reborn in the crucible of betrayal. Behind him, his legionnaires formed into a serrated arrowhead, pale ceramite and shimmering metal gleaming with battle lust. The butcher's nails, embedded in their skulls, shrieked for slaughter, their need to kill no longer suppressed. And from the fractured edges of the plaza, the Loyalists came to meet them. No less world eaters, no less blood-soaked, but now their fury burned not with implants, but with betrayal. At their head was Brother Captain Erlin, a veteran of countless victories under the very Primarch who now marched to destroy them. Around 2,000 Loyalist Astartes stood with him, world eaters who had survived the firestorm by taking shelter in nearby bunkers under false orders warning of an Isstvan suicide weapon. The rest of their scattered brethren still fought across the broken city. Now faced with double their number, traitors all, and Angron himself, the Loyalist embraced madness. A suicidal determination took root. If they were to die, then so too would the betrayers they dragged into the grave beside them. Without formation or finesse, both sides charged. Brother fell upon brother in a tide of wrath. The impact was catastrophic. Astartes against Astartes, matched in strength, fury, and skill. Hundreds were tore apart in minutes. Erlin was overwhelmed by dozens of traitors, dismembered as he cursed their names with his dying breath. Dreadnoughts detonated in the blaze of Melta fire, throwing fire and shrapnel through the carnage. Here, in the plazas of the Coral City, a bitter truth was made manifest. The old logic of imperial war no longer applied. There would be no broken morale, no outmaneuvered enemy, no victory through attrition alone. When superhuman met superhuman, only ruin could follow. Armor cracked not from one blow, but 20. Guns ran dry, blades shattered from overuse, and still they fought. Each death came at the cost of another. Among the blood and ruin, Angron was a force of nature, unrelenting, unkillable. He carved a red path through the melee, flesh and armor alike falling to his axes. Nothing stopped him. No bolter, blade, or defiance could stay his hand. The Red Angel roared the names of those he slew, as though their deaths were sacraments. And when the last Loyalist fell, and the thunderous clash ebbed into silence, the traitor stood amid the ruins, victorious. If such a word held any meaning in the face of such atrocity. Their white and blue armor was now drowned in gore, surrounded by the shredded dead and caked ash. Angron surveyed the horror and declared, "It is well done." Then, without hesitation, he ordered his legion to fan out through the city, to find more survivors, and to kill. Thus the true butchery began. This was the first time the Astartes turned fully upon one another. No quarter, no mercy, no forgiveness. Just vengeance, treachery, and war. Horus was livid. Angron's disobedience had jeopardized the delicate plan he had so carefully constructed to eliminate the Loyalists with minimal risk and without wasting valuable forces. That plan now lay in ruin. Yet Angron had forced his hand. Horus could not afford to strike the surface again with bombardment, not without incinerating the World Eaters as well, risking the wrath of their fleet, a potential civil war within the rebellion itself. Nor could he leave the Loyalists to regroup. They had to be crushed, now. With no other choice, Horus committed to a ground war. But the War Master saw an opportunity in this chaos. Rather than rely on a single legion to finish the job, he would draw all his followers into the bloodshed. Every force under his command would taste brother's blood. Every hand would be stained. In this shared betrayal, their paths would be sealed. No turning back, no room for doubt. The Emperor's children came next. Lord Commander Eidolon, perhaps eager to atone for the embarrassment Saul Tarvitz had brought upon them, moved swiftly. His troops landed with methodical precision in the burned-out remains of a park and market plaza several kilometers south of the precentor's palace. Without delay, Eidolon ordered his forces to form up in advance, confident the survivors ahead were shattered remnants. Meanwhile, more World Eaters arrived, reinforcing Angron's bloody tide. Death Guard and Sons of Horus gunships scoured the outskirts of the Coral City, dropping seeker squads and reconnaissance units into the ruins to hunt Loyalists, assuming this to be the final phase of a successful purge. But they were wrong. Eidolon's column soon discovered the precentor's palace was anything but a broken shell. The Loyalist Emperor's children still held it, and held it well. The traitor assault was met with withering fire. Eidolon's forces were stalled, then pushed back in retreat, leaving behind scorched wreckage and crumbled dead. Repeated attempts to push through were shattered by ambushes and redoubts hastily erected from the ruins, each effort costing more lives. Elsewhere, the gunship patrols fared no better. The ruined sprawl of the Coral City swallowed Auspex scans, cloaking the Loyalists' movements. Bolts of las cannon fire and missile trails lit the sky from positions the traitors had once known themselves. Now the enemy used that knowledge against them. And then came the final humiliation. One Storm Eagle gunship, identified as belonging to the Sons of Horus, and cleared for landing aboard the strike cruiser Minotaur, was revealed to be a weapon of vengeance. Its pilot, broadcasting over open vox, cried, "Avenge the blood of Terra," before ramming the vessel into the ship's rearming bay. Its las cannons tore through supply lines. The resulting explosion killed an entire company of Horus's own warriors. Panic surged through traitor ranks. Communications scrambled again. Vox codes were reissued. The Minotaur burned, and the cost of treachery mounted. Far from a clean execution, the Loyalists were rising, and they would not die quietly. Night fell over Isstvan III like a burial shroud. The sky, once scorched with fire, now bled ash and dust from the upper atmosphere, the lingering aftermath of the planet-spanning firestorm. From that poisoned firmament came rain, torrential, continent-wide deluges born of a world's agony. The heat, still rising from the ruined ground, twisted the winds into hurricane-force gales that tore through the wreckage of Coral City. Streets became rivers of cinders. The shattered remnants of city blocks groaned under the lash of ash storms, and thunder rolled through the broken skyline as lightning blinded the heavens. Vox links crackled and failed. Auspex sweeps turned to static. Air support was grounded. The surface of Isstvan III, once under the careful scrutiny of the trader fleet, now lay effectively cut off, swallowed by the wrath of the very weapon they had unleashed. Though the virus bombing had succeeded in its horrific slaughter of civilians, the next phase, the clean eradication of the Loyalist Astartes, was fast becoming a strategic catastrophe. The storm cloaked the defenders. The shattered city became their fortress. The Emperor's children had failed to break the Loyalist lines. Angron's world eaters had vanished into the northern ruins. A rabid tide even their commanders couldn't recall or rein in. Probing flights by traitor gunships yielded nothing but downed aircraft and sudden, sharp engagements with hidden enemies. The Loyalists, though vastly outnumbered, refused to die, and they fought with purpose. Coral City, once a place of music, now a morgue, echoed once more with the sound of war. The Loyalists pulled their enemies into tight, charred ruins, into dead-end streets and broken spires, where the traitors' greater numbers and firepower meant nothing. Running battles flared through the blackened tenements. Each corner turned was a trap, every street a battleground. The loyal forces concentrated their efforts in 3 key locations: the northwestern city blocks, the blood-soaked courtyards of the Precentor's palace, and the labyrinthian death trap that was the Siren Hold. Horus and his generals could no longer doubt it. Beneath the city, in tunnels and sewer systems, through miles of half-collapsed catacombs, the Loyalists were regrouping, consolidating, plotting vengeance with sharpened blades. And so the war ground on. Horus still had the titans of the Legio Mortis in reserve, but not even god machines could navigate the ash-choked streets or see through the storm's veil. Deploying them in such chaos would be madness. And so days turned to weeks. The storm did not lift. The world itself seemed determined to punish all who fought upon it. And within that darkness, battle raged. In skeletal habitation towers and corpse-choked sewage networks, Astartes met Astartes in brutal, close-quarter slaughter. Blades sang, bolters howled. The traitor reinforcements arrived only in pieces, staggered and unreliable, forced to rely on precarious drop pod deliveries for ammunition. The defenders knew every inch of the ruins. The attackers advanced only through the price of blood. In the southern industrial sector, Vindicator and Predator tanks clawed their way forward, street by street. The Loyalist ambushes struck like scythe blades. Sniper fire from broken windows, meltas from sewer gates, missiles fired from behind toppled smokestacks. Progress was slow, costly. Every meter was won with lives. In the Siren Hold, a transformation occurred. There, where once the proud green livery of the Sons of Horus had adorned the warriors of the 16th Legion, blackened hands now scraped away the warplate's heraldry. Paint peeled, symbols were struck off. The name of Horus was spat upon. They had become the Luna Wolves again, reborn in the Betrayal's fire. At their head was Captain Garviel Loken, once beloved of the War Master, once a core member of the fabled Mournival. Loken now led the resistance with steel-eyed clarity, betrayed, abandoned, but alive. From the Hold's haunted towers to the scorched south and east, Loken coordinated the Loyalists like a ghost general, striking where the enemy least expected, always one step ahead, preventing encirclement with daring counterattacks and devastating ambushes. To the south, the Precentor's palace remained a bastion of survival and defiance. Again and again, Eidolon hurled his Emperor's children at its fortified bulk. Again and again, they were repelled. Captain Saul Tarvitz and his defenders held firm, wielding salvaged heavy weapons and half-repaired tanks salvaged from previous assaults. And with them stood a symbol of undying defiance, ancient Rylanor, the venerable dreadnought of the Third Legion, once a hero to all, had become a living monument to what the Emperor's children once were. Time and again, the traitors believed him destroyed, only for Rylanor to rise from the dust, weapons blazing, defying his fallen brothers in the Emperor's name. Worse still for the traitors, their lines were harried by Loyalist world eaters, some driven by justice, others perhaps by nothing more than bloodlust turned against friend and foe alike. These warbands struck with feral precision, slaughtering, stealing munitions and vanishing again into the ruins. But nowhere was the fighting more dire than to the northwest. There, entrenched within the old Istvanian bunkers and trench networks, were the Death Guard Loyalists. Armed with weapons pulled from ancient vaults, they held strong. But they were surrounded. From within the city, Angron's berserkers tore at them with unrelenting fury, burrowing through tunnels, heedless of casualties, leaving slaughter in their wake. And from beyond the walls came the Reaper himself, Mortarion. Through the hurricane, he came aboard the Omen, an ancient assault ship of grim majesty. With tactical precision, Mortarion ordered its guns to sweep the approach clean, annihilating any position that could conceal a trap. Then he unleashed his legion. Through howling ash winds and lightning-lit dark, the Death Guard advanced in lockstep. Spartan transports groaning through the rubble, Fellblade and Typhon tanks rolling like titans of old. At their head walked Mortarion, grim and silent, counting the dead with every stride. The siege had begun in earnest. North of the ruined Imperial starport, perhaps 5 or 6 kilometers beyond the wreckage, buried deep beneath storm-blasted ash and crumbled stone, something ancient stirred. Unseen beneath the roaring winds and flickering lightning of Isstvan III's poisoned skies, a massive brazen orb began to shift. Grinding against the blackened soil, it slowly rotated free of the earth with deliberate strength, forcing itself upward through the choking layers of debris. Hours passed before the upper shell split open, its surface unfurling like a vast clockwork flower, each bronze petal bladed and jagged, spreading outward with mechanical precision. What rose from the ash was not alien. It was known. At least, it would have been, had any soul survived nearby to name it. A siege crucible of the Ordo Reductor, launched into the firestorm in the final moments of the doomed Loyalist Mechanicum ship, Xerxes 977. The crucible was a relic of war, a cousin in purpose and design to a Space Marine drop pod, but on a scale more vast and encased in near-impervious armor. It had survived its descent intact, burying itself like a meteor rather than shattering on impact. But no living flesh, even Astartes, could have survived such a fall. Its passengers, however, were not made of flesh. They were machine-born and logic-forged. Magos Reductor Calum Decima and his Thalax cohort, cyborg killers without warmth or wrath. Their arrival carried no hatred, only cold arithmetic. To them, the destruction of the traitors was not vengeance, it was necessity. Nearly 2 full solar months passed before the choking storms of Isstvan III finally began to wane. The fire-swept skies cleared just enough for the traitors to resume mass landings. In that time, blood had soaked the stones of the Coral City. For every block the traitors took, they had paid dearly. Estimates whispered of 20,000 loyalist Astartes dead, and twice that number of attackers. Still, the precentor's palace stood, held by warriors who would not yield. Loken's Luna wolves stalked the Siren Hold, turning the maze of ruins into a trap of corpses. Yet elsewhere, the tide had begun to turn. In the northwest, Mortarion's Death Guard pressed forward with grim resolve, crushing resistance between the city walls and the hammer blows of advancing legions. The Loyalists were squeezed into a shrinking kill zone, their options few. But even amongst the Death Guard, loyalties fractured. Several of their siege engine crews, Terran-born warriors who had once sworn loyalty to the Emperor, not Mortarion, broke ranks. Some refused to fire. Others turned their mighty siege cannons against the very legions they once called brothers. For 5 brutal hours, a civil war within the civil war erupted. The veil of grief. Discipline faltered. Order collapsed. Friend and foe bled as one in the confusion. Marshal Durak Rask, commander of the traitor Death Guard assault, was cut down by Chrysos Morturg and his loyalist destroyer squad. In the chaos, even Mortarion himself was wounded, burned by plasma fire from a predator tank, still painted in the Legion's livery. He answered that betrayal with rage, tearing the tank to scrap alongside his death shroud. Only by ordering a withdrawal did Mortarion halt the carnage, just long enough for a pocket of loyalist Death Guard to escape his closing grasp. Then came the reckoning. As the clouds thinned, fresh waves of traitor Astartes and war machines descended. Mortarion wasted no time. He turned his full might upon the embattled loyalist enclave, crushing them beneath a storm of steel. The few heavy tanks the loyalists had, Malcadors salvaged from Isstvan's defense vaults and seized traitor armor, were no match. Fellblade squadrons and Legio Mortis Titans pulverized their positions from afar. Wave after wave of Death Guard surged forward, shoulder to shoulder, their bolters barking in unison. Against this unending tide, the defenders stood defiant. They fired until their guns overheated and cracked. They held until their ammunition ran dry. But even courage has its limits. The Death Guard overran them, sweeping through trenches and barricades like a black tide. Those few that survived fell back into the subsurface tunnels, collapsing them behind them in desperation. But even underground there would be no escape. The traitors had come prepared. Vortex charges and Hades drills cleared the way, and Mortarion followed. Above ground, the battle reignited in full. To the southwest of the city, a Sons of Horus force made planetfall, 30 companies strong, led by First Captain Ezekiel Abaddon and his elite Justaran Terminators. Backed by heavy armor, they carved a path through the ruins, wiping out any loyalists they encountered with methodical brutality. Now committed fully, the War Master brought his full weight to bear. Massive orbital conveyors darkened the skies, delivering reinforcements from Legio Mortis and Legio Audax, Titans untouched since the firestorm, warlords, reavers, dozens of warhounds, and at their head, the monstrous Dies Array, an Imperator battle-class Titan, towering above the ruins like a walking cathedral of annihilation. Where its feet fell, the earth split. Where its guns fired, city blocks vanished. But it was not just Titans and legions that landed. In the shadows of their great transports came strange vessels. Insectile black gunships riding columns of blue flame, and battered civilian lighters adorned with flayed skin and blasphemous symbols. From the former emerged the heretics of the Dark Mechanicum, armed with twisted machines and flanked by skittering spider skulls and monstrous battle automata, titanic things larger even than a dreadnought. And worse still, from the corpse-decorated lighters came the witch priests of the Serpent Lodge of Davin, their very presence an affront to nature. Even hardened Astartes recoiled at their approach. They carried with them the stink of the warp, an unseen blight that tainted the very air. The tide had turned. The Loyalists, though unbroken, were outmatched. Every death now weighed heavier, every brother lost irreplaceable. And Horus had the numbers, the guns, and the monsters to finish what he had started. The math of war, the logic of slaughter, was now irrefutably in the traitors' favor. Their victory inevitable, their vengeance near. The shattered skyline of Coral City trembled as the Titans came within range of their target. The high curtain walls of the precentor's palace loomed ahead, already scorched and battered from earlier assaults. There, the traitor emperor's children were engaged in a renewed siege, exchanging blistering fire with the loyalist defenders entrenched behind the ancient bastions. But the engines of the Legio Mortis had been given no orders to discriminate between friend or foe. With a deafening chorus of war sirens, the Titans sounded their judgment. And then came the wrath. Volcano cannons screamed. Turbo laser clusters stitched the sky with arcs of pure light. The air turned to fire and smoke as the very ground quaked beneath the colossal fury unleashed. The curtain walls, once crafted to withstand a world in rebellion, now fell before godlike power. The bastion's dome collapsed in on itself. The towers within flattened like toys beneath a giant's heel. As the barrage faded and dust choked the air like falling ash, only ruin remained. From the chaos, a new sound arose, a bloodthirsty howl. Angron's World Eater surged forward, the Red Angel himself leading the charge. All that remained for the Loyalists was to sell their lives dearly. As the war dragged on, loyalty frayed. Captain Lucius of the Emperor's Children, consumed by envy of Saul Tarvitz, turned his heart to treachery. In secret, he contacted Lord Commander Eidolon, offering to betray his brothers and open the gates of the Loyalist line in exchange for rejoining the ranks of the traitors. The pact was sealed in blood. With cold precision, Lucius butchered 30 Loyalist Astartes, clearing a path for the final assault. Having earned back the favor of his legion, Lucius confronted Tarvitz and challenged him to a duel. The two brothers clashed, and though Tarvitz emerged the victor, Lucius fled, his bargain fulfilled. Elsewhere in the dying city, another reckoning unfolded. Captain Garviel Loken and his Luna Wolves, no longer sons of Horus, prepared for their end at the Siren Hold. It was Ezekiel Abaddon, first captain of the Traitor Legion, who led the assault, with orders to return only in triumph. The attack came from above and below. Assault rams punched through the tomb spires. Jump pack squads fell from the sky like thunderbolts. Tanks rumbled through cracked avenues, smashing through barricades and shrines alike. The black-armored Justarin, the elite of the First Company, led the charge. Loken's defenders fought with the fury of the betrayed. Ammunition ran low. Casualties mounted. Some tried to escape, knowing that living to resist again was its own form of victory. Others stood their ground, trading blood for time. The Justarin smashed through marble and stone, bringing death in waves. The Siren hold fell within an hour. Abaddon prowled the ruins, his triumph hollow. He cursed his warriors for their failure to crush the Loyalists utterly. His orders were clear. Fan out, search the ruins, and finish what had begun. Soon, the catacombs beneath Siren Hold were choked with phosphex smoke. Davenite witches and chaos cultists stalked the depths with unholy purpose. And amidst the hunt, a fateful encounter unfolded. In the charred ruins of Coral City, two duels sealed the fate of the old Mournival. Loken and Tarek Torgadon, defenders of honor, clashed with Abaddon and Horus Aximent, traitors made executioner. Torgadon fell to Aximon in a brutal single combat. Loken, though valiant, was grievously wounded by Abaddon and left broken, unable to flee the orbital bombardment that soon followed. Darkness claimed the city once more. Titans stalked its corpse. Gunfire echoed like distant screams. The final phase had begun. Not battle, but slaughter. Loyalists were no longer foes, but prey. Though the Loyalists were shattered, they would not die quietly. Every moment they resisted bled the traitors. Every Astartes that fell cost Horus more than he could afford. The arrival of Fulgrim only sharpened the urgency. Time was slipping away. The Emperor would learn of the treachery soon. Reluctantly, Horus gave the order to withdraw. Fulgrim and Mortarion were tasked with dragging Angron from the battlefield. In parting, Horus turned the guns of the vengeful spirit once more to the Coral City. Not with virus bombs this time, but with fire. He leveled it with high explosive, burying the last cries of defiance under tons of rock and fury. Earthquakes tore through Isstvan III. Structures collapsed as brothers fought beneath crumbling ruins. In pockets of resistance across the planet, Loyalists made their final stands, dragging traitors with them into death. The echoes of Isstvan III would ring for millennia. The planet became a grave, its cities twisted skeletons, its air thick with ash and the stench of treachery. Horus had tried to kill in silence, to end resistance before the galaxy could see. But Saul Tarvitz ruined that design. Flying into the jaws of death, Tarvitz had warned his brothers. Because of him, 2/3 of the Loyalist forces survived the virus bombing. A line officer once considered unremarkable had altered the course of history. Though he and the Emperor Children's loyalists ultimately perished, they bought the Imperium time. Garviel Loken also endured. Cast down by Abaddon, buried in the bombardment, he should have died. But fate, or perhaps the Emperor, had other plans. When he clawed free from the rubble months later, Loken had lost everything. His memory, his identity, even his name. He called himself Cerberus, the Hound of Death, believing death itself had rejected him. He hunted those who remained, believing himself the last loyalist alive. But he was not alone. Nathaniel Garrow, Death Guard turned loyalist, now an agent of the Emperor, returned to Isstvan III to find Loken. What he discovered was a haunted ruin and whispers of a monster in the shadows. The Cerberus of the wasteland fought him, nearly killing him, until the truth was uncovered. The virus bombing had weakened the veil between realms. The survivors were not men, but plague zombies, demon-tainted horrors of Nurgle. Garrow and Loken fought side by side to purge the blight, and when the battle was done, Garrow reached out once more to the man beneath the madness. Loken remembered. With his soul reclaimed, and the past no longer forgotten, Garviel Loken joined Garrow's cause. Together, they departed the ruin of Isstvan III, bound for Luna, and waiting for the presence of Malcador the Sigillite. The Inquisition was about to begin.